Welcome to the Notary News Channel. This is a forum for all things notary and some things not. My name is Desiree Roman Rodriguez, and I'm a subject matter expert in all things notary in the state of Illinois. I'm also an enrolled agent credentialed by the Internal Revenue Service to prepare taxes, troubleshoot tax issues, work with business to incorporate, and to represent taxpayers all the way up through the U.S. Tax Court. This week on the forum, we're going to be discussing the new changes that the state of Illinois has finally adopted and will be implementing effective January 2024. So let's get into it. For those of you that have been keeping track, the state of Illinois implemented a slew of new notary law changes that went into effect January of 2022. Most of those laws went into effect immediately at the beginning of the year, but there were several that were not going to be implemented until July of 2022 to give the state of Illinois time to initiate and implement the process and procedures that they were looking to have done for the state. And when July of 2022 came, the state of Illinois had not completed that task. And a lot of it was community members that were working with notaries in the state had insight and information and questions about the process that the state of Illinois was putting in place and whether or not those process and procedures were feasible for them as a company to implement, and two, something that notaries would be able to work with and implement in order to become notaries for the state of Illinois. And so after a lot of back and forth, there were several rounds. Roman Endeavors Inc. was a part of the process, and there were several rounds of questions and answers and problems and issues that came up that needed resolutions. And so it was finally all put together and submitted to the state of Illinois. And so now there's going to be this time between now and January 1st of 2024 for the state to start updating the website, putting the process in place, and most importantly, vetting the vendors that must be approved by the state to perform the training and give the tests that Illinois notaries will now be required to take in order to become an Illinois notary. So let's talk about the biggest change that's going to happen for Illinois notaries. So prior to this law taking place, if you wanted to become a notary, the process was relatively easy. You would fill out an application that you would have to get that application notarized, and then that would get submitted to the Secretary of State with the payment. You had to make sure you had a bond and air and emissions insurance and submit a copy of your identification. And then, of course, there were some other things that you needed to make sure was in place, like you couldn't have a notary commission revocation in the past 10 years before you applied, and so you couldn't be a felon. You had to be a U.S. resident, an Illinois resident, and several other conditions that you had to meet. But that was pretty much the extent. If you met the conditions, if you paid the money, if you got your bond and insurance, and you filled out the application, then you were able to become a notary. Well, all of that is now changed. And so the new law will require any Illinois notary to take a mandatory 3-hour training course, minimum of a 3-hour training course. And after taking that course, you will then need to take a 50-question exam that you need to pass by a minimum of 85%. Once you receive the passing certificate of the exam, then that would be submitted with your application, and then that would get submitted to the Secretary of State. Now, there's still those other conditions that you still have to meet. The state of Illinois has changed some of those conditions, and so it is in every notary's best interest to get to the Secretary of State's website, find the legislation, and start to go over what those changes are. Now, if you previously had training before, I assure you that a lot of the information that you were taught previously is now changed. So it'll be void. And so you will need to take a course, a workshop, or something that will update you on what the responsibilities and duties are of a notary. There are some changes that are being made to the requirements of keeping a notary journal. The very first one was it's not required. You have to have it. Before, it was highly recommended that you use it. That's no longer the case. You will need to have and use a notary journal. But then the parameters of using that notary journal, it has also been changed. So if you don't know what those are, you're going to need to know what they are so that you are not in violation of the proper way to maintain a notary journal according to the guidelines of the state of Illinois. Now remember, all states are different. Every state doesn't have a uniform way or uniform test or uniform method of notarizing documents, recording notarizations, or maintaining notary journals. So for Illinois, if you've learned a method that was general, now you need to know what Illinois requires, because now they are requiring mandatory use of a notary journal, and they have done it in a way different than that would be general consensus of filling out a notary journal. Remember that the state of Illinois has been leading the frontier on biometrics and making sure that its residents aren't falling into giving out that kind of data. And so they have taken big precautions to ensure that Illinois residents' information is going to be secure and safe. And one of the things is going to be requiring these approved vendors to ensure that they have a closed registration system and testing system. They are not allowing the vendors to use any third-party platforms other than a Zoom or a Webinar Jam for webinars, and a payment system like PayPal or Square. Those are the only two outside third-party platforms that any state-approved vendor may use. So that means all registration has to be done on the company and on a server that is being kept and maintained by the company that the state will approve. So there is a process for that. Roman Endeavors Inc. will be participating in that process to become an approved vendor and continue offering the trainings that we have in the past. Now, some of the new things that you will learn as part of this 3-hour course is remote online notarization. You will also learn about electronic notarizations, but not every vendor will be required to teach electronic notarizations, because that is going to require a separate certification. There will be a separate certification and course and a separate commission issued for notaries that want to perform electronic notarizations. Now, us, Roman Endeavors, we are not going to be offering that course, and we certainly aren't going to be teaching how to do that on any platform. There are vendors that offer electronic notarization training, and they show you how to do that on the platform that you choose to perform those electronic notarizations on. So once the state approves who those vendors will be, then you will be able to take that if you want. But If you are just applying for a regular notary commission, regular notary commissions and the standard minimum 3-hour training course will include the face-to-face notarizations that you're all accustomed to doing, and then remote online notarizations if you choose to do that. You do not have to do remote online notarizations. So a lot of new changes coming down the pipe that's going to be going into effect come January. We highly recommend that if you aren't good at translating legal speak, when you go to the state's website to look at what the changes are going to be, we are still offering courses to be able to communicate what the changes are. If you don't have your commission expiring until 2025, 2026, 2027, we definitely suggest you go online, take the workshop that updates you on what the laws and changes are. That way you are not doing any notarizations incorrectly until you are required to take the mandatory test in 2025, 2026, or 2027. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them down in the underneath the video below. We will try to answer as many questions as we can, but for the most part, it's a lot of information. And if you really want to have thorough knowledge of what you need to be aware of and what the new process and procedures are, we definitely recommend you visiting the workshop website, illinoisnotaryworkshops.com, and get yourself signed up so that you are aware of what's going on and what it's going to take to continue to be a notary within the state of Illinois. So that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.